Hello, fellow citizens from near and far. Today we're talking about building bridges across communities, and I'm really excited to get to this conversation. Please feel free to share with friends who might be, involved in this type of conversation. It's a big one. Basically, these live panels are set up in such a way where we have an enormous discussion to have. I mean, like it's huge. So much so that I have decided to break it up into smaller chunks. Today's chunk is building bridges across communities. We're going to be tackling some really unique parts of this conversation as, to what community actually is and what engagement and why it's important that we do so. Sharing success stories of communities, I hope, will be a big part of this. I know that I've brought them up every single week, but Farm Fresh 24/7, my boy Lawrence in Atlanta has been doing some wonderful things, and I think that among many examples, he's one of like a shining one. We're going to try and provide some practical strategies to discuss the barriers and the gaps that we all kind of feel when it comes to this kind of give and take. I really feel that we suffered a great collective trauma, and that's one of the reasons why our social skills are so whack. So that's one of the reasons we're here having this conversation, is because we're going to be talking about those things and a lot more. This is just kind of like an outline, a rough sketch kind of thing, as you will. We're going to be talking about the impact that building bridges and communities can actually partake, through every lens that I'm able to show here. Of course, everybody has a different perspective about this, and why I try to get a kind of diverse perspective in on these conversations. I'm going to be joined by some amazing guests today. I want to talk about how we're going to discuss the role of communication when it comes to community, the idea that we have to be able to show up and be seen and heard in this existence and whatnot, and be able to do so for others. I think that's very, very important as well. I think the barriers are a big piece of this, because everybody feels somewhat stuck socially. And so I think a big portion of this is, how do we get comfortable enough in our own skin? I'm really hoping that Tony will provide us some of his, insightful wisdom and whatnot on that. Everybody's going to have some really great things to say. I just know it. Well, I would appreciate you coming in on this most important conversation about building bridges across communities, because it's one that we collectively, it's a big important piece of the conversation, I feel, and that can be approached in many different fonts and flavors, as I like to say.
Yes, for sure. I was super excited that you asked for me to join in, because I too believe that this is one of those conversations that can really help humanity shift into more of a humanity-led way of being in our world. And I think that there's so much dehumanization that's going on that people are kind of lost in the chaos and don't necessarily know where to go. So a lot of folks are just kind of staying at home instead of building that community.
You're absolutely right. And I think that, my buddy and I go back and forth about how much the internet itself is to kind of blame for this, because we've gotten our kind of social creature comforts now online, where we find these echo chambers where we all agree in things, and it makes the outside world feel like less cohesive and a little bit more dangerous, which is just, on its head, backwards, really, because, I also attribute stranger danger and those kinds of vibes that we had through the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. It just it shifted our culture, our mindset away from being in community, and the atomized, individualized bubble became the status quo in a way.
Yeah, and I think that what else added to it is the age-old colonization. If you go against us and what we say and how we do it, then we'll just eliminate you. And when we're living in a time where we're watching a live genocide occur at the same time, it's this whole idea of those things being reinforced and brought together. But at the same time, there is community that isn't an echo chamber, where we see people standing up for these or against these atrocities left, right, and center. And I think that also has been bringing us to community. So I think I can hear when you said, you guys go back and forth on it. I can hear where that would occur, because this technology, I think, has also created communities in various ways that I think a lot of us haven't taken the time to really sit down, breathe it in, and be like, oh, wait, yeah, this has done this, and this for me. And it's not just an echo chamber. There are opportunities and places, things that I saw that are getting me outside of that echo chamber and allowing me to meet new people.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's a double-edged sword because it has helped connect some people to to let them know that they're not alone. Like for instance, me and Tony like definitely feel like we're like philosophical brother and sister in a way because there's just like, oh, we do actually have people that think kind of like us and as deeply in things, and it's like it's good to find like your found family, your tribe kind of thing. But it's very different than like the people that exist in your neighborhood and like you actually get the chance to exist in community in ways of like borrowing cups of sugar and like fundraising for the people who are down on their luck and like all the elements of society that did exist in some and some implement in our past that like we can directly point to the internet kind of like fading that away. And like I think there's also one of the things I say often is like we're the adults in the room, and I think many people my age kind of forget that because they're always expecting somebody else to kind of pick up and motivate and do these things like the old Kiwanis Club and those kinds of like organizations. They just expect them to continue without participation, and so it's like, guys, we're the ones that have to participate now. Like if you like these things, like these old festivals that you remember from your childhood, then you might have to play a part in bringing them back. Like revitalizing takes effort. It's not a passive thing.
Yeah, and the past is our education. And so I think there's things to learn from a lot of that as well. I think as we have, we meaning greater humanity, created more creature comforts, created vaccines and other things that have extended our life. It's like, well, what are we doing with that extension of life? And who has really talked about that? And I think that there has been just this bludgeon of capitalism that just said, no, we're going to take it all and we're going to make you work more, and you're going to be dehumanized, and you're going to not be anything worthy of us besides your time and your work. And I think that we keep getting fed that as well. And I think that that's part of this this blend, this mix as well, of why some folks don't even know how to define community for themselves. It's much more than just how I was a teacher for 12 years. I was in the classroom, and I think that we really threw around belonging, right? And I still believe in that term, and yet I know that I need to define that. Every single semester, every single quarter, when I was in school, I wanted to co-create. So I wanted to hear other people's definition of it and what they thought it was. And I think it's the same thing with community. What does that mean to some folks? And for some people, I think that one of the big aspects of community is not just that we have similarities or things that we think a lot alike, but also a sense of trust. And so if there's been things that we get fed by the status quo, by that indoctrination of dehumanizing the other, then my trust is automatically broken. And therefore, I'm not even going to look for community because now my definition of it has been shattered and I don't know how to define it again.
Yeah, no, that is a really tough moment, and I think that people can face that in certain times in their life, certain hardships when, and like community. I think like there's like the broad term of community, and then like what people think specifically, and a lot of people think that like their friends, their chosen group is community, and like to an extent, yes, but like it's not, like I said, it's not always convenient in the way that there are people who are willing to show up and help, even though you guys don't ideologically agree. If it's a solution for like in. Of course, it depends on what kind of scope we're talking about. Like boots on the ground, there's like, a flood in your area and like you all need to help each other, like with relief and stuff. Like that's the helpers coming out and actually doing the boots on the ground work. It doesn't really matter in those cases what a person's ideology is if they're going to roll up their sleeves and actually, help deliver people out of suffering and into comfort. And in that regard, like we have to build kind of broader coalitions and be willing to sit in some discomfort to help try and move the needle in a direction. And like it's one of those that it's a slippery slope to kind of dance around, but like connecting to people who have like for all intents and purposes been in survival mode and not really like tuned in and like at the start of some journey of their own, to be able to like come to understanding in a communal sense where it's a long time thing. It's not something that's instant. It's not like, hey, you and me, we exist like in the same relativity that makes this community. Like it's conversations. It's it's being able to like find common ground and like, build a relationship of some kind. Basically making friends where you are, and like having that ability. Like sometimes it can be really scary as far as like bridges, like, gaps in the way, to just be able to put yourself out in a way to be seen by others, especially when like, there's the fear of, the unknown, or, consequences and those kinds of things.
Yes, and tell me if I'm saying the same thing. Um, I feel that there's a lot of things within the world, ways that we are taught or told or structured, or the things that we've seen other people do that dehumanizes. So when you keep using the term we and us, and you're talking, I'm assuming, of humanity, of human beings, there are
Yeah.
so many folks who don't see me as a human being because I'm non binary, because I have deeper melanation, that I consider myself to be black, even though I'm multi ethnic, that I wear particular clothing, that you might find me in particular areas of town, or whatever it might be, that we've been indoctrinated into, that all of a sudden says, you are lesser than, you are not a human being. And so when we talk of community and we speak of gathering folks together, how do I gather folks together if somebody doesn't even see that I'm a human being and they're utilizing language that's dehumanizing me? And so some of the things that you were talking about prior, of like building those bridges and some of those success stories, I think through storytelling and actually actively listening to each other is where we start to forego some of those implicit bias, those stereotypes, prejudices, things that we've been indoctrinated into, and really begin to see each other's humanity. And that's what I mean when I say humanity led. I want to lead with the fact that I may disagree with you fully, but I see you as a human being first and foremost. So I love you all, as another human being, as a fellow earthling. And yet I may not like everything that you do. But when it hits the fan, I'm gonna stop by and be like, is there anything that you need? Do you need me to run and get your meds? Do you? Because I have set up that community, and I do know that Mrs. Johnson, three doors down, doesn't have any family close by, and will need those meds. And I'm capable, I'm able-bodied to go and get these things to support, even though she may use language that's very outdated, and I cringe a little when they use
Yep.
it. I still feel drawn to their humanity because they still are trying to see mine as well.
I feel you. I feel you. And it reminds me of, do you know who Daryl Davis is?
The name sounds familiar, but I
He
can't.
was a musician, I think a blues jazz musician who sat with different members of the KKK over the course of like 25, 30 years. He converted, some estimates say as low as 50, other estimates say as high as like 250 people to like, like move out of the Klan. And it was that way of like sitting with them and showing them their, like, his humanity. And like, I'm not saying that like that is like anybody's duty or anybody's calling, if they feel apt to do so, and they have that strength within them, because like it's like going into the wolves den over and over and over again. Like, it wasn't necessarily the safest thing for him to do, but like because of his empathy and like his insight into like the way that these people had been raised and indoctrinated, he was willing to like sit in that discomfort and like help them move past it. And it's beautiful. Like one of the things that I want to do is a like traveling citizens podcast kind of deal. And in the episodes where we don't like interview specific individuals, we're gonna be talking about people like Daryl Davis and Maya Angelou and people like that. And so yeah, it's one of those that having grace for each other. Exactly, Jason. And it's one of those that it's hard. It's a hard place to come from, especially if you have your own perception of traumas and like things that have happened to you throughout your life. We all have our own like healing struggles to go through, but it is a point of we still need each other at the end of the day. That's always going to remain true, and the more of us that can see the humanity in each other to move forward in that direction is kind of the calling. So those who can sit and be a part of that conversation probably should take the time to do so. And those who need the healing in order to do so, I mean, we all have our own journey, but that doesn't mean that sitting back in the reality of like, this is who I am forever and ever is like the healthiest thing, because we still need you to play a part in building these communities and moving forward. So,
and I think what you're touching on a little bit is, you know, buzzword in the teaching world is that growth mindset. What do I have a fixed mindset about? Right? So having this conversation, listening to other folks, reading what people are putting in the chat and everything, if I am open to a growth mindset, I'm not looking for people to be supporting what I'm saying. I'm looking for those activations and those sparks of like, oh, wow, I never looked at it that way, which is expanding my viewpoint. And I think that is something as well that in going into defining community for yourself, for those around you, is to have that growth mindset. Because somebody else might be like, oh, community to me is these things have to be there. And it's like, wow, I never even thought to put those things in my definition of community. But it's like, I see where you're coming from. And now you sharing your story, I for sure can respect that and give you your humanity. See your humanity, not give it to you. See your humanity, you know, right. Let you have your dignity and still be in community with you, you know? And so, yeah, giving myself grace as well to have that growth mindset when I recognize that I've had a fixed mindset about something, I think is really integral as well to building community.
Absolutely. The ability to, self-assess, evolve, the line of thought, not be rigid because of the propaganda and everything that is coming in, the idea that we actually have to sit intrinsically and figure out who we are to move forward. And that becomes, part of a self dialogue before you enter into community. Because like, if we're messed up, like if I'm sad and flustered because, I'm emotionally ill regulated, and then I go into like a group meeting or setting, I'm bringing that energy in. It's not, don't get me wrong. I will say, like I said in a video earlier this week, grief shared is a grief halved, whereas a joy shared is one multiplied. While that is true, walking in with, dysregulation into the group, and maybe it's like a sense of like over and over again or something, but like, to be a cohesive part, like you have to, you have to have some sort of balance inside. And I don't want to say have, because everybody, again, has different points in their healing journey. And if you need to show up to the party wounded and in need of help, that's one thing for sure. But like, the idea of it's an ever-growing progression, and one day you will hopefully be who you needed to be, so that way somebody else can benefit from your healing journey and whatnot. And that's that is the kind of the cycle of it all. I want to say thank you to all my friends who are in the chat, tapping and liking away and sharing and whatnot. If anybody wants to come up, just go ahead and send a guest invite, and I will send you up here. I still have 2 guests that I'm waiting to come in, but they are running a little bit late. No worries, having a great chat anyway. I'm wondering about, because when we're talking about how community means different things to different people, is there a broad enough definition that can that we can sit this platform on, or is it really is it fluid, do you think?
Well, first of all, I want to do a shout out to Farm Fresh. Is that Tony who's with Farm Fresh?
That's Lawrence.
Lawrence.
That's Lawrence, Nature Boy.
Yes. I've been in other groups with them. And so, yes, beautiful. I was like, wait a second. Yeah, I know you as well. I think that I tell people, please, thank you, but don't invite me to your table. Invite me to build a new table with you. Invite me to actually push up my sleeves, or whatever analogy you want to look at, and so that you can hear my truth and I can hear yours as well. And so I think it's about co-creation. It's like I was saying, everybody has a different definition of community. So why not take a moment and sit down and be like, I would love to go around and hear your definition of community, or share a story of a time where you felt that you were in community. And that's where I want to start. I want to actually co-create with folks. I don't want people coming in and being like, okay, you got 2/3 of my definition of community, so yeah, I'm going to hang out here. It's like,
Right,
no,
right.
I want to hear from all of you and co-create with you. So,
Right on, right on. No, I think that's great. You know, the fact that it can be a malleable thing, because I think that when we look at it, there's an idea that, you know, cultures, it's a tribalism thing, but the 100 to 150 people is pretty much all that like one person can really like care for in a society. And this goes for activism too. People get like overloaded with the idea that we just like our scope of concern gets bloated and we lose our sense of our scope of influence and those kinds of things. And I think that, you know, having a malleable, like, you know, workable solution to where community can be anything depending on what group we're talking about is probably the best way to go. Victoria, thank you for joining us. I know that we just made acquaintances just a few days ago, but I really love the content that I have seen. I think you're doing some wonderful stuff. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for the invite. But to your point, what you think, like having the shared spaces, and oh, that's what it was, the 150 people, I think that's a fallacy. Because just look at some of like the institutions that we see in the world that are like, quite frankly, destroying the world right now. They're more than 150 people large. Like we have things that are larger than life, organizations that are larger than life that are more than 150 people. And if they're able to organize them, there's no reason why we as regular people can't organize.
Right. I think that this distinction between with the community of like 100, 150 is the idea that in a group that small, everybody can know each other. You know, neighbors know neighbors and that kind of thing. And don't get me wrong, like I lived in a small town of 6,000 people. It was like 6,000 people and six old sore heads was kind of like their vibe. And everybody knew everybody's business. So like, I mean, obviously the number is kind of, you know, probably meant as more, I don't want to say baseline, but kind of a workable number in the way that the scope is only so large, and there is a point of tip over where, and like in organizations, they don't necessarily need to all know each other as long as the goal is known throughout the organization. And so like that is where, and like when we talk about, you know, creating a viable solution for communities, we can still have that cohesive goal that keeps us, you know, to the idea. And then that's where we kind of get into people need to be able to vision cast and storytell so that way more people see like the cohesive, like the plot basically, and are able to follow along. And I think that's one of the key things that's really missing from like, you know, the paradigm shift and everything that we're seeing occurring. There's 300 plus movements out there of people doing things differently from like this old status quo capitalistic system. But like there's very few storytellers sharing about those sorts of things. And I think that's one of the things that's probably missing. But when we come down to the local community, like your, like, the people that you associate with because they are in your nearest vicinity, like the people in your you know, in your neighborhood, that kind of thing takes some effort now because it's so much easier to just go online and find people who agree with you and like minds, that kind of stuff. But like reality is the only place you can get a decent meal. And like if you need to borrow a cup of sugar or whatever, you can't, you know, come online and be like, hey guys, who's sending me some sugar? You know what I mean? So like that, in those kinds of ways and fashions, we still very much need like our boots on the ground community around us. And that itself is a huge gap for a lot of people because that face to face is more uncomfortable than ever because of, you know, collective traumas and all these other kind of things. So we're facing off at this point where I feel personally that a lot of elements of society have broken, and we're just kind of seeing like the status quo crumble in a lot of ways. And if we don't act fast to like revitalize our communities and build these bridges and really make ourselves in any sense of the word sustainable. So like, for instance, division among party lines is one of the easiest things to look at, because like if you are tuned into certain news stations and the buddy across the street from you is tuned into other news stations, and then you guys go online and you're bickering online and blah, 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 blah. Like you are very diametrically opposed. That starts separating these people out. But then there's like some sort of festival, a brews and barbecues kind of thing. And you both are there, have a great time, good food, good music. And it helps heal that divide a little bit, just a little bit. It takes more work after that, you know, the coming together in community. But that can be a place of start, you know, is giving people an experience where they can coexist on their best behavior because they're in reality, and you can't say these things that you say online because it will get you punched in the face. You know, those kinds of sentiments. And like putting people together, I think, is one of the most important things, because like we have to shake from the reality of the idea that we just, you know, that if if you don't agree with me, if like, we are completely, if we are at odds in like a single issue kind of thing, then like I'm going to cut you from the herd completely, and that'll be that. And like I will go and move on and find my other. And I think that's probably one of the most toxic, like the cancel culture idea online has become some of the most toxic things to occur in real life. And so like I think that is one of the problems to solve for, and that's bigger than community. That's like one of the conundrums in my opinion, but like it factors in, I think.
Yeah, people are living more and more in like these echo chambers online. I think a lot of people are unaware of the like cognitive confirmation bias bubbles that we see on like. I question it constantly all the time. What I'm seeing on my For You page, and like I'm seeing people who are trying to make a difference in the world, and I'm seeing people who are putting out hopeful messages. But I know that that's what I'm looking for. So I question all the time. I'm like, is this like I think that we're seeing a collective shift in consciousness, but is that just my own algorithm bias, sort of, you know what I mean? Like, but then also I think that might be a trap in and of itself, like people getting caught in the like, because it feels safe and it feels comforting and it feels good to just have everybody agree with you all the time. But I think that like it's a double-edged sword, because it could disconnect us in that way, but then like it also connects us, and I think that it has the potential to just like I said, organize at a scale that humans weren't capable of before. But we need to like be active participants in like cultivating it and using it that way, using it as a tool instead of passively just consuming whatever comes our way.
Absolutely, great point. Yeah, and I think that's part of the barriers and hurdles that we have to face, is kind of recognizing that we can use the online space as a tool to really organize and grow out beyond those numbers. But it can't be, it's not the end all be all. Like we some effort in real world is still
Exactly.
needed, required.
Connections are still really important. There's actually a lot of research on how technology affects the brain and how it affects dopamine. But there's significant research that I think is talked about less, about how social interactions affect the brain and create dopamine. And it's almost like we're kind of, it's easier to get the dopamine hit from the screens than it is to go out and get it in person. But as much as like this conversation is great and it feels aligned and it's wonderful to be talking to like-minded people, nothing beats the experience of having the same conversation, sitting around a fire. Maybe somebody starts playing guitar. That shared experiences is really what connects people. So that's the mission that I've been on, is to just try and cultivate spaces that will allow for that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've been looking at a friend of mine. A friend of mine explained a read-in, and I was like, okay, I'm doing this. And please shift what I'm about to say and create and do this however you want. I'm in Portland, Oregon, and there's Powell's bookstore, but there's also a great library here. And so I kind of want to just pick a topic. I don't know what, barbecuing to World War II, to the queer liberation movement, to Black female artists or Black female writers or whatever it might be. But then all these different books, a group of people come together. They're given 45 minutes to read whatever part of the book they want to. You want to read the front cover, you want to open the book and point your finger and start there and read for 45 minutes or whatever it might be. And then everybody comes back and then kind of like pair shares. There's the teacher in me, educator. So pairing yourself up with one other person and sharing and actively listening to the other person for, a couple of minutes each, and moving on to somebody else, maybe do 3 or 4 rotations of that. And then just kind of a group conversation about how the whole experience was for them. Does anybody have a topic for the next one? When do you think the next one should be? Love you all. We'll see you at the next one.
Love that. Absolutely love that. And yeah, and I love that for several reasons. One, like the communal activity of people, participating in something, learning, of course, in that space is always really nice too. And like the idea of active participation, you get kind of all of the elements of, citizen paradigm shifting kind of, in one solid event and like a third space sort of deal. I want to say that there are some interesting things happening, and then Jessie, I'll go ahead and introduce you. Let's say some words. There's something on the East Coast that I've been really fascinated by. It's like this idea of it's called lectures on tap. People will come in to a bar while, like, an architecture or biology professor comes in and gives a lecture while they're sitting there drinking and having a good time. And it's just like, it's a revitalization of like education. And it's really fun because people my age are eating it up. And so like, that's one of the reasons why I'm doing something very similar, but in my own kind of lane. But like the experience of, going out for education purposes or going out to have these things. And then there's two other events. One of them is like a group of professionals, young professionals or whatever, walking around a park, just, picking topics and talking. It's kind of like a meet and greet sort of situation, a way to get, to do it outside of a bar setting, really, which is really what this kind of group started to. Now, they did it in a couple of different cities, and they've just signed up their first date in Denver. Some of my friends are going to that one. Unfortunately, it is the same day that I am doing longer tables, which is this year they're doing a mile-long table. That's 5,280 feet worth of table, and having people sit down. The thing is, you can't sit next to somebody and you can't talk about work. But it's, a breaking bread sort of deal. They're doing breakfast or brunch this time instead of dinner. And it's that kind of giving people an experience outside of, a little bit outside their comfort zone, or in a way that, makes them feel very welcomed and in a certain space. And that is definitely a way to build community. Thank you guys for joining us. Jessie and Tony coming in a little bit late, but we appreciate you joining the conversation so much. I'm just going to give Jessie a few minutes first, then we'll get to Tony. Thank you for coming in. What are your thoughts about the building bridges of community, Jessie?
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for your patience and me joining late. Mercury's in retrograde, so.
The microwave.
Yep, exactly. So my thoughts about building bridges in community, well, I've been a conservative, I've been a liberal, I've been a leftist. I grew up to blue collar family. I have been straight, I've been queer. I have had a lot of different identities that I have had to recalibrate and try on, and I feel like that has put me in some unique positions to be able to translate across different ideologies, faiths, belief systems, and curiosity is probably the best way to approach this.
I can dig it. I can totally dig it. Right on, right on. Tony, thank you for joining us today. What are your thoughts on building bridges across community?
Hello, everybody. Sorry, I'm tardy to the party. Building bridges across the community. I think first we have to ask ourselves, why are we even having that conversation, right? There's work to be done in our communities. There's a lot of work to be done in our states and in this country. And building bridges to me you could describe it in a few ways. One, when I'm being cheeky about it, is it's just making friends, right? And maybe in more challenging situations than, with people that already agree with you. But then the other one is just identifying needs, right? And I think that's the disconnect between a lot of citizens here is we're all caught up in these other more superficial culture war things. And when I say superficial, I only say that because, it might mean a lot to one group, but virtually nil to another. And you can just pick one of those culture war topics and it fits that narrative. So I think identifying common needs is where we're at in this conversation. And so that is that bridge, because when you have something in common with somebody else, how much easier is it to connect with them? Whether you're bonding over video games or golf or food or crochet or the zodiac or all the myriad of things people can have in common, it does make it so much easier to connect with them. And so I think identifying needs is a great place to start with people. It might be a great place to find that commonality that you need to get past maybe some of the more grating parts of each other's personality that you may disagree with.
Well, and can I add, from being in organizing for the last 20 years, for the last 5 years, everybody's been like, I'm in survival mode. I'm just doing what I need to survive. And so unless you are taking something off of somebody's plate or solving a problem that they have, the likelihoods that they're going to be able to be engaged in something is less. So finding where that common problem is that you can work on together is the best bridge that I have found.
Hello.
Hello, my friend. Welcome into the discussion.
How
Yeah,
are
you know,
you?
commonality. One second, Andrew. Just commonality is definitely one of, I think, the keys. You know, because when we boil it down to like humanity's basic needs, food, water, shelter, and things like that, I mean, everyone kind of rolls their eyes and goes, yeah. But like, you know, if your community has a specific need, then galvanizing around solving that can actually create a lot of energy and momentum. So like something to consider. Welcome in, Andrew. You said you wanted to come up and say something.
I did. The thought that hello everybody. Once again, Tripp, thanks for having me up. I really appreciate you. Nice to meet you, everybody. It's a pleasure. The thing that I was thinking of that you were talking about to build bridges with people that you are trying to make communities with across maybe barriers that might be difficult to overcome otherwise, eliminate buzzwords, right? So when you're starting to talk to people about things, like don't say words like capitalism, communism, socialism, any of those words. Keep them out of your vocabulary because those words will trigger people to say other stuff, right? Like if you there are certain people that if you say the word communism, they cannot help but try to explain to you how communism has never been like communism. It's always been a force. Like they can't help it. It'll completely derail your entire conversation.
It's true.
So words like that, if you can keep them out of your talk about what you want to accomplish, right? State your beliefs. Be like, I believe this. I believe in a free market. I believe in a so on and so forth with great services for our least like. But try really hard. It'll make things go a lot easier if you don't use any of those buzzwords. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, man.
Yeah,
No, I definitely agree. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I just wanted to say to that point, like that's you said say your beliefs, state how you feel, because that is the need. That's the base need, and I've noticed that a lot of times. But like most of us are working class people, and we're all just trying to look out for the needs of our families. And it's just that people have different ideas of how to go about doing that. And that's a really good point too, is that there are just certain words that are associated with either left or right. And then as soon as somebody pegs you as like, oh, you're either left or right, it's like in your mind that we're either on the same side or we're not. And it's hard to kind of come back from that sometimes. So yeah, I think that is a really good point.
So the only thing you can do is not set it off, right? Like, and you'll everything will go fine as long as you don't do that. You have to. I try to pick everything I say pretty carefully for that reason, but you know it gets hard to think in the moment sometimes.
I mean,
Well,
it's
words.
not just capitalism and communism, working in the environment, even saying climate,
Yes.
the environment,
Climate, environment.
ecology. You have to say nature, you have to say trees, you have to say lakes.
Language matters. And unfortunately, over a long period of time, what ends up happening is like a word becomes saturated in one way or another with certain connotations. And I think that the false dichotomy is seriously to blame about a lot of this because, like, it's a spectrum, people. Everything exists upon a spectrum. If you think there's only two sides, then that's the false dichotomy. Because, like, in most, and you know, nuances, case by case, all that sort of thing, sure. But that divide that, you know, once you use the word and it triggers, oh well, you must be on this side because only that side uses that kind of language, you know, that is the tool of the oppressor working in real time to try and get us to yell at each other instead of realizing we have common ground. But I will say that yes, and say over time with those words being saturated, being creative with one's language and avoiding it is absolutely a good way to kind of like follow through and kind of curve around. And over time, like in the next 50 years or so, there'll be different words that are now covered in that connotation and either will or won't be used, depending on what our actions are going forward. And so, like, that's just the progress of time. But yeah, I'd say that off the chopping block there's a list of words. And, you know, depending on, like, again, this is kind of dependent upon community, where you are. Different things are going to work for different people. I love saying the idea of people just need to say these kinds of ideas in different fonts and flavors, because then other people will kind of dig on and like listen. So thank you all for being here with me.
Sorry, it's not really about the words. It's about the common need. It's about focusing on the common need and the common ground and using the right words to do so. The words you use don't really matter as long as you're able to accomplish that. Focusing on the common need and the common ground.
Well,
And I think the
there's
best.
one.
Go ahead.
This is a little bit in the weeds. Have y'all heard of neuro-linguistic programming? Like basically
Yes.
retraining your brain. I've noticed that the politics in this country, a lot of things that the words that typically conservatives hear, woke, snowflake, any of those words, they have been paired with the emotion of rage or anger. So when somebody hears those words, they immediately get triggered into their survival brain. Whereas the words that are paired with Democrats typically leave people in fear and shame. And if you're in fight, then you still have mobility in your body. If you're in fear and shame, you're in a functional freeze. So I think that's something to be mindful of, that some of this language can take us straight out of our relating brain, out of our empathy brain. And questions are the best way to get around that, because curiosity will mitigate that cognitive dissonance. It gives that pause for people to go, what do I mean? So
Actually, I think that's another a really good thing that you can do. Everybody likes it if you get people talking about themselves, right? Like you said, asking people questions is important, but if you're trying to bridge a gap between yourself and somebody else, if you can get that person talking about what they got going on, and then be interested enough to listen, which is also the difficult part, because
It's sometimes people call it the friend Olympics. Like, okay, I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to pay attention, and I'm really going to pay attention.
yeah.
Okay, stuck the landing. All right. And like sometimes, because people have a bunch of things going on in their worlds, and like the tune out factor, unfortunately, has been part of the play for many of us. And yeah, you're right. People do love talking about themselves. And it's a good place to start a common ground, because once you realize where they're coming from and let them be heard, then that's somewhere to go from, And in some cases, like we were discussing earlier before most of y'all showed up, Daryl Davis, and how he sat in his discomfort with others, to help people move from the Klan into, normal society, because like they didn't see him as a human until like he sat in with empathy and like showed them humanity and basically things like that. And so, and I'm not saying that every interaction is going to be as like, crazy diverse, but like it sometimes just putting yourself out there kind of feels that way. It feels, and that's one of the barriers that we have because, of a bunch of different ideals and things, but being able to bridge that gap through listening, having a conversation where you're actively engaged and, interested in what the person has to say, can go a long way. But again, that's basically making friends, in a way. It really is. Real fast, I just want to say that I love everybody being here, tapping and liking and sharing and having this conversation with us. We had some good convo in the chat as well. And yeah, I just, I think that when it comes to community, it's kind of a hard conversation to have because everybody exists in a different one. Like there, that broad sense of what community is, definitely takes nuance when you get down to like, my group versus your group versus your group. Like, everybody has these different, and it's based on different interests, different mobilities of scale. Some of us, some of us might be attuned into more communities of disabilities, disabled persons, and those kinds of things because of our our history and whatnot. Like for instance, not that my mom is definitely handy capable, but she is missing from here down on her left arm and was born that way and can do many great things. But because of those circles and stuff like that, I am more attuned to she's worked with lots of people and like that, and like so like and our stories are different because of that. Like not everybody's going to have that kind of lens. That's important when coming to the table of community, is to kind of have that empathy of being able to see that somebody's life is completely different from yours and still being able to find the common ground. Go ahead, Tony.
Being willing to look through other people's lenses is so important, because it's like,
yes.
It's like the lens that we're given only allows us to see a certain portion of the picture. Like the community that we live in allows us to see a small sector of the world, But in order to like see the whole picture, it's like you have to put the puzzle pieces together of like being able to see things from other people's perspectives.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. Go ahead, Tony.
To piggyback off of that, I think it's because we're afraid we might see something that we don't want to see. There's a fear of the unknown. But I want to add to the overarching conversation here, which is community doesn't just mean your social label. Whether you're a Christian or you're part of the LGBTQ community, that is one cultural identifier. But when we speak about community, that's not all we mean either. It means your local job and family services, your local organizations, Reach Our Youth, mental health and addiction services. There's so many ways that we can plug into our community and start to bridge different elements of community. In one of the panels, I don't know if it was the last panel we did or the one before, the gentleman who came in talking about wanting to have a staffing service that specifically focuses on the veteran community and those with mental health challenges. And he had it as a business idea in his mind first, but the thing that I thought was the most crucial to understand is that could be an agency, that could be a nonprofit, and that could plug directly into job and family services and mental health and addiction services and veteran services as well. So we may have an idea and we may see it as a way to contribute to community, but sometimes it's important to realize that community, as it were, sometimes can represent local agencies as well. Completely staffed with people who do that for a job, who would be ecstatic to see someone else come in and take some of the workload off of their plate, because a lot of them are super overwhelmed too. I just wanted to add that, because a lot of times when we say community, people come at it through that cultural and social lens of like, well, my community of people who are like me. It's like, it's not always like that. Sometimes we actually can view it through the institutional lens of community as well, by checking into agencies that are already active and working in your community who probably desperately need your help.
And I think that there's something to be said about a strength in a diverse community. Like the people, like, getting outside the bubble and finding people who, don't necessarily fully agree with you, and like finding, bridging the gap is part of, making things, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, more soluble, more sturdy in the way that, because for instance, the mudslinging that occurs for, the dichotomy and all of the things, like, if this person did this certain thing, vote whatever, blah, blah, this certain way, then they are X, Y, Z and all of those other things. And like, they just are. First of all, it's monolithic and extremely dangerous. Second of all, people who are thrown those monikers feel, some kind of way about it. The people throwing those monikers feel some other kind of way about it. And it starts to make the possibility for bridges even more difficult, because these places start to drift apart from each other. Whereas if we are able to see eye to eye, human to human, in like our communities in a diverse perspective sort of way, then when somebody says that sort of, it's like Tony did a great video about this, about having friends in every clique, and then when like one clique starts bad mouthing another clique, like feeling kind of personally hurt by that because you have friends there, like that's the kind of thing, like what the diversity of community comes like a sort of strength of knowing that the mudslinging isn't accurate and we can actually move past that. And that's like I think that's one of the biggest strengths we could acquire along the way of building diverse, building communities and then bridges into more diverse communities, and like really solidifying the fact that like humans are humans and seeing the humanity, it starts super small, where, like in small degrees, but I think that we have to find a way to make it grow in a sense of, human to human relations that, rises above rhetoric. Really, I really am targeting the idea that we need to get past the rhetoric of each other. Go ahead, Jessie.
And I'd like to add in, just for any of you autistic people who are thinking, how do people work? Well, your nervous system looks at anything that is unfamiliar as a threat. It's going to try to keep you exposed to the same emotions, the same people, the same situations, because what it has done in the past has kept you alive. And seeing people who have different ways of living, have different ways of doing things, it's sending people's nervous systems into looking at something new, looking at change as a threat. And so I don't think that people realize that this is a process of gradually exposing yourself to things that are uncomfortable to build your window of tolerance so that, like, I don't think people realize that there are a lot of people that are chronically dysregulated and kind of it's hard to build connections when you're presenting them with a way that looks like a threat to their way of living. I think that's why some folks have, I'm not going to go into that, but yeah. So a lot of this can center around how can we build nervous system safety with each other when we have differences.
Creativity and shared experiences. That's my theory.
I can dig it. Absolutely. Well, and I want to kind of circle back to the idea of like storytelling and vision setting. Like if everybody can really like focus up on ideas about like, you know, what we want to see come a year, 5 years or what have you, like, you know, real, and like having the ability to tell that story in a palpable way that makes people see see the vision for themselves and like jump on board. And you know, creativity, of course, absolutely is called for that.
What you said about like just knowing your neighbor and knowing that they're, you know, from a different, whatever it is, black, white, gay, straight, different community, different label, whatever you want to call it, and knowing their story kind of puts a different story in your mind, like you said, just about like you said, talking about another group and then feeling personally hurt by it because you know somebody in that group, and so you know that what's being said isn't necessarily true, and that's like solidifying a story in your mind because you know somebody who's a real person that like it puts a face to it. So I just like, yeah, I kind of made that connection, and it's everything that motivates us is narrative, and it's not just the narrative that's being fed to us, but it's the narrative that we're like repeating in our own heads. So.
And as
Absolutely.
those of us who are trying to be community members, how do we interact in situations like that where we see division being created, and how do we build that bridge back up?
That's a great question. Matthew, it looked like you had something to say.
Well, I'm being sparked, which is wonderful, by everything that everybody's saying. My work that I offer and that I put into the world now is based on the question of asking yourself, how much of my thinking is my thinking? And I think it helps me get through that idea that I am coming from an indoctrinated place. I'm coming from colonizer illness. I'm coming from these places that weren't even mine to begin with. And so there was a question that just went by a little bit, power with and collaboration. That question about, well, how am I defining community? Whose definition of community am I using? Am I using the definition that comes from a healed place? Or am I coming from a position of being oppressed or being told that I'm lesser than, that I'm not even human? So how can I be in community with you if you don't even see me as another human being? And so I think that there's so many layers to it that I just want to make sure that folks within the room and those who are watching this and who will watch this later really understand that it starts here first. I must look inside. I must be introspective, and I must understand what is coming from me and what is coming from the indoctrination and what is my future. If the past is my education, I want to be inspired by my future. The future is our inspiration, and the present moment is our creation. What am I creating right now? So that future stays in this inspired place instead of it being like, ooh, this is coming up, or oh, this is going to be a problem, or I'm going to need to build a bridge here, or that just burnt this bridge. I mean, all those things factor into it. So when we're talking about, Victoria, when we're talking about listening to somebody else's shared stories, is that coming from the authentic me? And so I know that I just added a whole thing maybe for some, and for others it's like, no, I get you. I'm where you at. Actually, I'm already here, so let's go there. But I really felt like I wanted to put that in there to make sure that we are being introspective, holding ourselves accountable, have that group of people that can help support us being in integrity to what we say, and also having that growth mindset I spoke about before, and making sure that I know that I am allowing myself to grow as a human being as I continue to move forward. because it's not necessarily about the words. It's about seeing each other's humanity. You can say whatever words you want, you know, and I'm going to share with you, hey, that made me feel this way, or this came up with for me when you said that. But that's a whole nother way of like that I was not indoctrinated into. I was indoctrinated into that bipartisan, that binary, that nope, you don't think like me. Now I got to be against you. If I have to get loud about it or physical or whatever, then I will, because that's the way I've been indoctrinated into being. Disrupt that, y'all. Disrupt it and divest from it. So when I'm building community, I'm restructuring me as well as I'm doing. Thank you for
Absolutely. No, see, I want to kind of jump on that because there's this concept that I've known for a couple of years. I really wish I could remember the person who showed it to me, was the idea of like, you know, as far as our feeds go, this gets a chance to be either mirrors, a bunch of representations that are just like us, you know, the echo chamber, as it were, or you have a chance to find windows and doors. You know, windows into places that are experiences unlike your own, which is one of my favorite things. Like, if you went combing through my actual like people I follow list, it's just so many different walks of life that are not my own, and that's my favorite thing because then I get to kind of see other people's experience. Very empathetic sort of thing. But then there's the doors to consider, and those are the people that not only show you a different lifestyle, but invite you to come participate with them. And you know, and I've seen, you know, and there's a few of them here on the platform. You know, but like it's more windows and mirrors at this point. And like, and I think that, you know, having the, like the perception of oneself to kind of recognize the difference when you're watching something of a mirror versus watching something of a window, and like how that makes you feel and stuff as part of that introspection is definitely like a key piece of this, and something that I don't think we would have gotten without the online space, which is part of the reason why it's such a double-edged sword when it comes to community, because I have been able to experience more windows in my life than I ever would have without it. But again, there's a sense of comfortability that like it's detached from me in certain ways. Like, yes, these people are community, but like but in, you know, in certain ways, that's great. You know, I can show up, I can vent when I need to. When I'm feeling low about something, I have people to back me up. But like if I need like physical needs in my world around me, most of the people that I have in my circle live states away. So like, you know, that becomes part of the disconnect and the double-edged sword of the internet community space. Once again, thank you all for being here. We just crossed the first hour mark and I'm having a lovely time. Great conversation. Everybody in the room, again, if you want to share this with people, I really love that. If you haven't followed it, like all of these people, you really should pick them up because some great individuals, really hope inspiring type stuff. As we get back to like the actual conversation, I want to talk about pick a point, any point. The idea that the impact we could have. Like, let's spend a little bit of time maybe vision casting here. Like, you know, the idea that if we were to show up in our representative communities, you know, fully informed with who we are, you know, showing up with our best intentions to solve solutions. I mean, just imagine, like, you pick one topic, you pick one thing, and, like, you know, I think it starts like a tsunami of change. You know, ripple effects turn into waves, and if we all got motivated simultaneously, even if it was about different things, the change would happen faster. I think. I don't know. Just saying. No, I'm just opening up the conversation anyway which way we want to go. But I think, you know, the vision casting, the storytelling is important. Somebody, anybody?
Hello. Can I address that?
Go ahead.
One thing that I've been so I tend to think that most of our problems in this nation are top-down problems, right? It's because the people want one thing and the government does whatever it wants instead. So I think that the best solution that we all should be pursuing, in my opinion, is forming a representative body that makes us all have a really good conversation amongst ourselves. It's not a legislative body, just a body where we have our units and communities that we speak to amongst ourselves, and then we appoint people to speak to other communities in the body, you know, like with the idea of formulating a sort of cohesive, conscious idea that I think it can go really far if you like
a sort of citizens
assembly, a citizens assembly, yes, as it were. Like, yeah. And I think the main thing that we should focus on doing, in my opinion, which is like, I'm ahead of this. I have a lot of people who I'm working with and everything, but I think you need to find like 10 people that if we were all gonna have a vote about something, you and those 10 people would agree on what you were going to vote on. No matter what it was, you're probably all, or like to enough of a degree that you would all vote together on it, even if you have disagreements among yourself, right? And then your 10 people, your group of 10 needs to find more and add to it and form a larger body on top of it, which then communicates with the other bodies in that size. And we keep on stacking it up until we're sending politicians with policy as opposed to just sending people that we're electing and letting them do whatever they want, right? Like I think that needs to become our goal, to formulate an organization assembly, citizens assembly as it were, that gets us communicating amongst ourselves well. And I think that this helps you with your community thing because it gives you a goal to unify into, right? It gives you something that we're working towards as opposed to just trying to make friends, right? Like, because trying to make friends is great, but like that's the thing about friendships is people gotta want to be friends with you. And like, they've got friends, but everybody wants to see societal change. Everybody wants to get the world to be better. And if you don't have to put that much work and you can still help with it, that's the kind of stuff people do. So that's kind of how I see it.
Go ahead, Victoria.
So I'd like to talk about like affecting change.
Oh, I'm losing you. I can't hear you.
Yeah, no.
You just get a phone call.
Yeah, I was getting a phone call, sorry. But no, so I wanted to talk about just like enacting change within politics and also outside of politics. Because I think that like that's a great plan, like trying to become more active within your local community and like within local politics and kind of like working way up the ladder to like affect real change on a larger scale is important. But I think that it's also important to organize and sort of build our own systems outside of politics that will help us to be less dependent on the elected officials. Because what if we don't get our people in there? What if those plans don't work? What if we can't push them to do what's really going to be beneficial for us as a society or for us as a people? Then we should be able to fall back on like our own private communities and be able to support each other if we're not getting support through the government. You know, I don't necessarily mean support, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, and
I definitely think that there's.
Sorry,
I think there's many different approaches to this. There is those that are like within the lane of the status quo that is built, the institutions and whatnot. They can, with a lot of effort, they can be changed. I have this radical idea of like people campaigning together across multiple states to get into like the representative kind of seat or whatever, like say 10, and it's like they campaign for each other as a way to like get everybody in and whatnot. But like, you know, it's a risky kind of thing, and I think that it's only one piece of the solution, because you're right. The solving problems outside the needs of government or corporations, for that matter, is one of the key ways that we can solidify communities. Because if, as a community, we solve that problem together in a unique and creative way, that's only going to make us stronger as a group. And then, like that in essence, you know, that strength will hopefully piggyback to ways of getting more people in, and you know, finding. And it's like these keys of success, like the Farm Fresh 24/7, and these kinds of people that are implementing really great ideas to help bolster not only getting off of like the corporates, big system and whatnot, but like, you know, teaching, education, stewardship of the land, and like all of these different facets that are leading to a strong community in Atlanta. Absolutely so. And it's just like one creative solution, but there are many. Go ahead, Tony.
Fast and Furious out there. I think it's important for us to remember that once upon a time, there was the very first group of Freemasons. Once upon a time, there was the very first meeting of the Rotary group. Once upon a time, there was the very first people who got together as the Odd Fellows, right? Or Kiwanis, if I haven't said that one. And eventually those things, some of them turned into international organizations, right? And to the younger generations who didn't really get to see the types of impact that those organizations had on community, ask the little old lady who gets her electric bill paid randomly by one of those organizations, or the rec center that gets an ADA accessible wheelchair ramp put in because of one of those organizations, right? They're everywhere, and they can start small, and there are perks to starting one of those or being a part of one of those. And so I would just suggest that everybody spend at least a little time, take 1 quarter of a year, one season of a year, and go spend a little bit of time around them, or even just take an afternoon and go have lunch with somebody. Maybe the president would meet up with you. Just to get a glimpse of what it's like to be in a group that is not a church, it's not a government agency, it is its own organization separate from those entities, right? And you get to have your own mission statement, your own rules, statutes, board of directors. Like you get to establish all of that stuff and have a direct impact on the community. And to speak with Andrew's thing, where you go and tell 10 more people, it's a way to achieve that without it feeling like Herbalife or something, you know?
Which is one of the dangers here. Yeah, I say we either, because like I feel like this many-headed hydra, many different paths that can go. There's a big section of them that end up in, you know, pyramid scheme type territory, as well as cults. Go ahead, Andrew.
Bye. I have to hop down. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for being with us and joining us. But yeah, no, like it can go a couple different ways, and few of these paths end up in like a culty or, you know, pyramid type scheme kind of way. But, you know, I think that as long as the people of the community have good intentions and, you know, want to see things done correctly, I mean, it can go a whole bunch of different ways, and humans do human stuff. But like, it's definitely worth trying something outside the box, outside the status quo, and many different things at once, you know, because sometimes it's like throwing spaghetti at the wall. We just got to see what sticks. I do want to say, Jason put up a great comment. He's like, I think we need agency to participate. We currently have no agency, and I'm kind of a little curious about that. Where does agency come from? I know this is a little bit off topic, but it's not. It kind of connects. Everything connects. But
Numbers.
like, where?
It's numbers.
Numbers? Okay.
Yeah, well,
okay.
because if the president of the Kiwanis Club has something to say about the new downtown revitalization project, people listen. But it didn't start that way. You know what I mean? Agency comes through representation of numbers. And if you're like, I'm the president of, make one up, you know, Flimble Dam, okay? We have an organization called Flimble Dam, and I'm the president, and I represent the interest of 750 voting members of this ward, this district, this part of the county. It matters, man. It just matters, you know?
Okay.
But
I can see that.
it does take building it first.
So this feels like this might be oversimplifying it. And I think one of the things that could really benefit us as a society is helping people build internal motivation. Because a lot of folks are stuck on external motivation, fear of being punished, fear of being ostracized, fear of not having your needs met. And the three pillars of internal motivation are competence. So feeling like you're good at something, autonomy, feeling like you have any sort of direction over it, and connectedness, feeling like you're part of something bigger. And even if you look at like the Bible, the Gnostic Gospels were left out, which are the ones that help you figure out who you are. So I think that what we can do in this time, especially people like us, is I heard a term called consciousness activism, and I've kind of run with that over the last year. And if there are enough of us like this that can hold a vision, what would we like the future to look like? And enough of us agreeing, okay, here are the tenets of what a healthy society would look like that considers interdependence and long-term needs of everybody involved. And we can hold that vision. There are energy workers, there are spiritual folks who, if we have that vision, and it doesn't have to be the same, but if people don't know a different way exists, then they don't know it's possible. And I think that some of us as people in these positions, our responsibility is to know our positionality, who we are by virtue of who we were born into this system. What part are we supposed to be playing? Because that also provides us with insight into where our greatest leverage points are. And so those of us like us, knowing our positionality, knowing the stuff that we're carrying in our suitcase with us, having nervous system regulation skills, having social and emotional intelligence. I'd love to see us talking about emotional first aid, talking about how to identify propaganda, discernment, and kind of becoming nodes who know how to navigate conflict, who know what does accountability look like? Like you were saying, you know, holding people to account. How many of us have seen accountability modeled? How many of us have seen conflict resolution modeled? Like not a lot of the people who are in positions of power. We have not seen it in the home, in the schools, in the systems we live in. So if we're expecting people to take accountability, do we have a framework for what that can look like? So coming up with these frameworks that we can hold a collective vision on and move towards that. Yeah.
So I might go somewhere that, yeah, I might go somewhere. So you might have to like pull me back in, kind of thing. I, once again, for me, what I'm inviting people to do is to look at that. And so I have a process called the 7 C's, and it starts with that curiosity. You know, the first one is that curiosity. So then it goes back to that agency that Jason was talking about. There are so many people that have been indoctrinated out of curiosity. I start that workshop just by asking the people in the room, what was the last thing that you were super curious about? And not curious in the sense that I'm going to Google that and get an answer, but curious because it sparked something in you. You felt it somewhere in your body, and so you got gravitated towards it and wanted to do something about that, figuring out. And it didn't mean that it was an answer or anything in that sense. It was more just the journey to get there. And so that curiosity sometimes brings us into creativity. And that creativity, we need to collaborate with other people. And so if I'm collaborating with other people, then sometimes I got to ask them for clarity, because I want to know what they're really talking about when it comes to collaboration. How many folks actually have their own definition of collaboration and share it with other people when you ask them to collaborate with you, right? So once I'm asking that clarity, what we have is we're connecting. We have connection that's happening. And then it's going to do this, right? And go all over the place. And so we have to have consistency with it when it's not stimulating us in these big ways. And then we wrap it all in compassion. That's the 7th C. And of course, there's more than 7, for sure, you know, but it's this idea that we have been dulled down to the point where we're not even curious about things anymore. And this is that double-edged sword of technology. Curious about what? Huh? I can find it right here. I can just Google it or look it up, and I don't need to be curious about anything. But what has that done to us actually expanding beyond these ideas? So a lot of the things that I hear folks saying, and I just realized, Victoria, that you were putting your hand up at the same time I jumped in. So I'll try to land it. The idea behind it is that we have been dulled down to the point where we're not even trying to come up with something new. We only come up with surviving. It's not actually building something new. We're still using the master's tools. We're still doing it within a framework that is a catch-22 and does not want us to expand beyond it. It wants us to feed ourselves to it in the grind and keep the haves having and the have-nots notting, and we leave it at that kind of thing. And so I want to end it really quickly. I help people with a process called crafting your equity lens. And this is my 39th equity lens that I've written. And it goes, I am crafting a world from my liberated curiosity, sparked creativity, and activated collaboration. I am nurturing the cultivated joy found in my rebellion so that it can build bridges of solidarity. We are moving as a collective to build a world rooted in love, mutual care, cooperative economies, transformative justice, and abolition. We are bringing forth from our souls the necessary building materials to lay down a foundation of our shared humanity. Inspired by the youth of future generations, my dreams are crafting a world. Dream big, y'all. We are so much more than the status quo. So much more.
Oh, yeah. Tony, before we get to you, I'm going to have Victoria go ahead and come up because she did raise her hand before you. Go ahead, hon.
That was beautiful. I don't know how to. I have to get back to what I wanted to say before. I think we've been like, that's part of the conditioning, is that we've been conditioned to think that like we're not all creators, that we don't all have the power to be creators. Like we're kind of taught that. Like even if you think of like the most current use of the word creator, like most people probably associate it with like content creation. and it's like, and that's also like content creators are like put up on a pedestal, like they're celebrities, or like they're like special people, or artists or musicians are like put up on a pedestal, like they're special people. Like we don't all have this innate ability as human beings to create. I think content creation is also like an important healing tool if you know how to use it that way. But I've definitely been seeing a lot of people, and like from my own experience, I think that like just being able to show up and like just come on here and talk to the camera and not be afraid to just show up as yourself, in and of itself is healing. I think more people just like stepping into their power and embracing like who they fully are and creating the visions and the dreams that are in their head is like super powerful. And I think more people, I would love to inspire more people to do that and experience that, because I think that in and of itself will just spark change, planting seeds, you know?
Thank you. No, this is the right group. You found the right people, because we collectively, working in our own paths and lanes, are currently working on big ripples that will inevitably cycle more and more people in as we go. But it's all kind of niche at this point, so I'm glad you got in early. Tony, you had something to say. Go ahead.
I do. And Matthew, I love that you get into this element of curiosity and creativity. It's my favorite part of this conversation, because so many of us get lost in the weeds of activism. What is this specific group and what's their mission statement? And we're hopping into these groups. Rightfully so, they need help, all of them. But there's something else that happens to you when you read revolutionary content. So whether you're reading the Federalist versus the Anti-Federalist papers, or Black abolitionist documents, Black Panther documents. I have a book here that changed my life. And why is that? Because we're imagining something different now. The Radical Reader. This has so much in it, right? And it seems like each of these writers is speaking specifically to their group's plight, like if they're writing from a marginalized group, and they are. But there's something else deeper that's happening, and it's the mind of the revolutionary that's looking at the current world and understanding that there's something very wrong, deeply wrong with it. And now it's our job to imagine a different way, right? And so Lawrence and Farm Fresh 24/7, I harp on them, and not harp on them, but I reinforce their mission so often, because it's another way. It's food. It is a food system, but an imaginative way that you wouldn't have been able to arrive to without a certain degree of curiosity. If we have a problem with the police force, identify the problems, create a group, create a solution, involve yourself. If we need de-escalation, then be a part of the group that offers de-escalation to them, instead of just waiting for them to do something that they're totally not equipped to do, right? But we have to have that curiosity, but first identifying that what we're talking about just isn't just activism. I tend to shy away from that word, because what we're actually doing is revolutionary. And it's important to get into the minds of the people that were active in these great periods of change, because you're going to see, oh, they were looking at a completely different model coming down the road. And the most important part is that they knew they may not ever see it come to fruition. And that's really what we're asking people to do, is commit yourself to something that hopefully, if you have faith, for whatever that word might be, still worth to us in the 21st century, that it will plant those seeds that the future generations can enjoy the fruits of. But this curiosity is important, because we're imagining new businesses, new agencies, summer camps, after-school programs, mental health support groups, men's groups, women's groups, reach our youth programs, like all these things. We already thought of them, we already thought of them, but they may need an updating. They may need a fresh coat of paint. They may need a young Gen X or a millennial or Gen Z viewpoint on them. But we're also disconnected from those organizations, that we're not even sure who they are, what they do, the fact they exist at all, or let alone the fact that they need an update. They need that firmware update. So I wanted to really take that time to illuminate the curiosity part, because it's important to see what's there already, and then have curiosity about how could it be different? How could it actually be better? And what would it look like and feel like to live in that world?
And
I think that, go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, as somebody who has burnt out of so many different fields, because I have been in the middle of that, I was told you change the system from within. So I tried to in politics, I tried to in academia, I tried to in nonprofits, I tried to in, and every single time, the people making the decisions, they didn't want to hear the problems. They didn't want to solve the problems. They could not handle hearing that they might be doing something that didn't align with perfectionism, that might expect them to actually do some self-reflection, taking accountability, and making a change. And so I appreciate that you do have that hope and maybe faith in the institutions that we live in. And I also am coming from a perspective of knowing that the behavior that's seen modeled in those institutions are not conducive to healthy human anything. And
I dig
so
it.
a
I
lot of
dig it.
people need to see what that maybe looks like.
And the
I
fact
feel
that
like
they're all at their jobs. You know what I mean? Like we see them as a character archetype. You know, city government is like this. You know, the VA is like this. Police are like this. But we forget too that they're human and they're at work. And there's already a ton of stupid shit that they got to do every Monday morning, and they don't want to be there. And so when we think of help in that regard, it's like, okay, if they need something, in what way could I create it so that it's modular, so that it adapts to something and provides a very clear benefit to that organization and alleviates some of those Monday blues for them? You figure that out, it's a pretty easy sell to the commissioners and the police chief, usually, you know, but it has to be modular, and it can't be that like you're expecting them to do even more shit that they don't want to do on Monday morning. You know what I mean? Because if we're asking them to add to that plate, then you're absolutely right. It is 100% not going to happen ever.
And I think that there's a couple of different avenues to go. I think you're absolutely right. If you just toss a bunch more work on people who are already doing the work, not much is going to get done. Finding creative solutions around solving those kinds of inert problems that are just kind of like the chuffa, the administration, the day-to-day get through is definitely part of it. I think galvanizing participation in any manner is really the active goal here, because whether it be to the system as it stands or whatever, if we get enough people to like flood it and do and have like the things and whatever, who knows what might happen. But like we need many different paths being walked at the same time. We need outside the system as well. We need things that would be modular, that can plug in. Some stuff that would be like creating a safety net outside the system completely in case it completely crumbles. Like we just need to galvanize people to stand up and participate in any way they feel not necessarily even most passionate about. I know last week when we were talking about the paradigm shift, people are motivated by different things. Some of us are motivated by, the idea that this should be a thing. Like, for instance, my motivation in Right to Food has nothing to do with my relationship to food, because I have a very weird one. But instead, I understand like the concept that everybody needs to eat, and so for me, like I'm passionate about that part of it. But some people will do things out of spite, and that's a great motivator as well, or out of grief, or and there's several different factors. And I think one of the things that sometimes people get hung up on is like, and it was said last week that people, be told to do what they're passionate about, and they have a hard time figuring out what that is. But like, if you can figure out something that like basically keeps you engaged, like a topic that really takes you to a place where every time you think about it, you are moved to like act or say something or do something. That's the kind of motivation. That's the kind of, that's a broad version of the passion that I think is needed. And it takes so many different forms, but every single person has a role to play. And so like finding your role, finding the ways that you can authentically show up in community with the skill set that you have and, contribute is a great form of strength. It can take many people a longer road because they have to, maintain that introspection first, but it's part of the work. And the more people we get to stand up and do that, the bigger our communities get, and the stronger they become, and then those building of bridges, I think, would also become easier because people are willing to show up and be present and communicate. So, just some thoughts there.
Would we even have to build bridges at that point? That's what I'm hoping to get to, is that, that intrinsic, to me, that's Sparked by so much and in all words that mean something, trying to get out of my mouth at the same time. If we
I dig it.
if we had an education system that was based on lovingly supporting every single student that came through the door and nurturing that intrinsic motivation at an early age, right? It's not about this is what's going to make you money. You have to go to college. You have to do these things. You got to make money. It's all about money, money, money. And it's this scarcity thing. And we instantaneously in preschool and in kindergarten, we start separating them out. Here's my bluebird readers. Here's my turkey readers. You can't read yet? Oh, then you go over here. But the brain doesn't function that way. The cognitive brain develops and it's different for every single person. We can't put these big, huge guidelines on it. And yet that's what the American culture has done. That's what white supremacy culture has done. And it keeps feeding us into that. So how do we, once again, disrupt and divest from that? Because I think rebuilding bridges, I think there'd be a lot more understanding of like, oh, wow, you think differently than me. Cool, I get it. We're having, sloppy joes tonight. Why don't you and your family come on over? We'll sit in the backyard and eat. It's not this like, all of a sudden I don't see who you are as a human being. It's like, no, I need your spark that you think differently than me because it challenges me to expand my thought process for me to be even more curious. But instead it's fisticuffs. And it's like, how did we get here? And then that's when I say, I do not subscribe to that ideology. We got to find a new way to do this. And that's that paradigm shift that you're talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's some really great conversation here happening in the comments right now, talking about public education system isn't keeping up with the current needs of our new generation. I think that that echoes back to our concept of, people not having the will to learn, like having their curiosity kind of beaten out of them. I think it happens in the public education system and, in like regards to making obedient workers that don't really think too critically of situations. And like, that is my own perceptual lens from, being raised by hippies. But it's a concept of like, there's the idea that education was at once a leisurely activity and not something that people, were forced to do in other society and like, in other times of life and stuff like that. And I want us to get back to that because the idea of learning in community of, like for instance, your idea earlier about bringing people to like a library to talk about, subjects on books and have them read, like, I would love to be a part of a group like that. Like that is totally my ish. And no, it's not everybody's, but I think that there would be a lot of people who'd be down to like just learn random facts about a subject and be able to talk about them in a sort of third space setting. Libraries are a perfect space to have like these sorts of community groups. We got to utilize the spaces that we have available to us, as well as, inventing new ways and whatnot. There are lanes such as the library and whatnot that we can still utilize. So thank you all for having really good conversation in the chat here.
I'd love to add something to this.
Go ahead.
If you don't mind. Sometimes we're looking for those creative ways to engage with community and help out in all these in endless multitude of ways that you can contribute to your community, right? And I know I've been harping on this, so I'm just going to stay in this lane for this chat because I've got experience with it. So the organizations, think about Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. And if you could go in with a genie and make it whatever you wanted it to be, well, what would you change? What types of things would they be learning? And in what function could it serve in this modern society? Mm-hmm. That's the curiosity I'm trying to really pull out of Matthew's statement from earlier. It's like that level of curiosity, but it doesn't need to be from scratch because that can be overwhelming. I've been an artist my whole life, musician. And when we try to force an idea, it feels overwhelming and it feels dry. It feels, we have a word for it. It's contrived. That's what it is. Fake and forced. And so sometimes you look at somebody else's song and you use that as inspiration. You look at somebody else's painting, somebody else's recipe, and that provides the foundation for you to try your own thing on it. And so do it with Boy Scouts. Do it with a Reach Our Youth program. Do it with an after-school program, a summer camp, family activities. Like, really just start going through the things that maybe you remember super fondly from your childhood and think, okay, one, does it still exist? Two, if it does, do they need my help? Probably. They're probably weeping at the overwhelming amount of work they have to do. And three, if it doesn't, then, you know, what can I create maybe in its stead? And I think that that might give a lot of people a more tangible jumping off point for community activism than trying to come up with some brand new way to save the world or to save your local neighborhood, save the community, save the school, whatever. Look at some of these old organizations, because I wrote down here in my notes, they're great systems. Look at the Rotary, look at their mission statement, look at what they're meant to do, the Lions Club, look at what they're meant to do. But then think about how some of these organizations have been problematic throughout history too, and how they've been unsafe places for people. And then think to yourself, well, was it the system, or was it the people who were products of their time, culture, propaganda, and so on, colonialism, and so on and so on. So if that's the case, then maybe it's not that we throw the baby out with the bathwater and just be like, never again with these fraternal organizations, never again with these types of agencies. It's like, well, you know, that might be a little hasty, you know, a little much. Like, let's look at them, adapt them. What would a young Gen Xer do if they got to recreate it from scratch, or a millennial, Gen Z, like in all the different cultural tendencies and nuances that we have between one another? Because then I say, great system, problematic people, modernize it. Then the question mark, the curiosity. What does it look like if we modernize these old things? I would even dare say, and I get crazy looks when I say it, and this is where I'll land the plane, is I think we even need to do that with church itself. I think it's good for people. Even if you're not a Christian or a Jew or Muslim or practicing Islam or Hinduism, like there's certain elements to getting together with folks every Sunday and breaking bread, laughing, crying, being vulnerable, learning a deep moral lesson about things, singing a song or two. That's my favorite part. But like, I think we need to really modernize and revolutionize the old world, not necessarily uproot it or burn it all down like some people think. And you know, and it doesn't have to be some brand new idea, because that's overwhelming. So my advice would be to, and this might even be my closing statement, Tripp, because I'm looking at the clock.
We're not there yet.
I know. I'm hurrying. It's just, you know, we already have examples of things that worked really, really well in certain ways that may be dying out. That maybe the only people left in these organizations are 72 freaking years old. And they're tired, you know? So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Take what worked and maybe scrap the rest.
Yeah, I was basically going to reiterate kind of a similar sentiment about reinventing the wheel, taking the pages out of the books that came before us. And Joe Mars down here says, those organizations are the bones for community. Victoria, you raised your hand. What did you have to say, my dear?
So, I mean, just to play devil's advocate a little bit, I mean, I do agree with you. I don't think we should just, like you said, throw the baby out with bathwater. I think we should build upon the things that work and take what doesn't work and just expand from there. But just to play devil's advocate a little bit, I think part of the reason why like some of these organizations don't exist or aren't as active as they once were is because people like in general feel burnt out. Like, and I know that if you really want to do something, if you really feel passionate about doing something, then you can find the time to contribute, even if it's like in small ways, even if it's only like a couple of hours a week. But I do think that that in and of itself is a challenge. Like if you're somebody who has kids who's working 2 jobs just to feed them, it's hard to even just get outside of survival mode long enough to go and be an active participating member of existing communities. You know,
I have a ping pong to send the ping pong back over to your side of the table. One beautiful thing as I was talking with the
I think you got a phone call.
All right, sorry. I was talking with the president of the Kiwanis. This was last fall, and she was sort of new to the area. Her and her husband were retired. They were older, and she just did it just to connect with people, right? But then her husband got sick and he passed away. And she thought she was like alone, and she was like, it's a really beautiful story, and I'm trying to paraphrase because I feel like I've already been talking a lot. Casseroles left at her door when her husband passed away. People showing up, people calling, people being there, because she had made, and this is the whole point of this live, is community. Like that's the thing, is like we don't have time. Who's going to watch the kids? Well, maybe somebody at this place could be the bestie you've been looking for who also has kids. You know what I mean? It's like maybe I think the reason we're so isolated and we feel so tired is because we've been trying to do it all on our own. And maybe these places could be the spots where we start to build that.
Mm-hmm.
And I will also say to that note, we don't know where we stand now at the precipice of, because like for instance, when it comes to like the bowling league or the activities and that kind of thing, the groups that you can get together in and stuff like that, like they want like 15, 18 weeks of your life, like every Thursday for like 20 weeks, and it's just like that's kind of a big commitment. I don't know if I can make 20 weeks, and so like that I think that's part of the draw. And especially when it comes to like joining Kiwanis and Rotary and stuff like that, it comes with a certain limit of like participation that is required. And for some of us, that's a hesitant key, because like we don't know if we're going to feel the same way about a thing like 10 weeks from now and that kind of deal. And like that's more intrinsic, dealing with like your inner stuff and whatnot. But I will say that I present that as a possible barrier and gap to like us actually joining these organizations, other than the fact that there may have been problematic people, there may have been experiences that aren't as shiny as some other people's experiences when it comes to it, or it's just something that people don't really conceptualize being kind of a need in society, because like it had been met with it was kind of outside their scope and reality or whatever. Like they never really dealt with the Kiwanis and never really understood what they were doing, even though they still may have benefited in their community. They didn't really know, because we don't know what we don't know. And I think that part of the revitalizing communities and things like that is coming up with options that maybe similar, maybe different, maybe run in a new structuralized way to fit our generation society and to-dos, but like still does take from the bones and the structure of doing community good for community good's sake, that kind of deal. And that's where you get those sorts of groups and whatnot, and they all had their own mission statements, and that was important part of the key, because the Elks Club, the Lions Club, the Rotary Club, they all focused on similar but different things. And so like we look at these structures, take what worked and update them. I think that's one of the things that this time, I'm not going to say like any sort of generations or anything like that, but like at this time, people across the board have to find ways to revitalize, to make anew what once was, because we can make things work for ourselves, but it does take active participation. Matt, we're going to go ahead and go to you, and then we are going to go to last words. So we'll go ahead and have you say your sentiment now, and then I'll come back on, and then we'll do last words.
So I believe that if we allow ourselves to expand into our biggest, fullest, and brightest, that we will come up with new things, that we don't have to repurpose anything. I think that we are in a catch-22 that keeps feeding us the same stuff. And that's why we go, oh, we've done this. Oh, we've done that. Nobody's come up with a new movie. Nobody's come up with a new song. Nobody's come up with, and then those crazy kids with their wacky hair and their clothing and the music they're listening to. Now grow up and get the job and do these things. But what happened is this technology happened. And when I was in the classroom, I watched a couple of generations, their cognitive brain developed completely differently. And their thinking is completely different. When I went to college, it was just the L&G studies, lesbian and gay studies. And they were thinking about adding the B for bisexual. And now you have LGBTQIA2+, et cetera, et cetera. Because they have expanded in ways, they have brought language in that did not exist when I was the same age as them. That right there gives me hope. That's why in my current equity lens, I state that the future, I'm inspired by the future youth, because they are beyond this. And what's happening is society is trying to push them into that status quo box. But what happens when we take the lid off? What happens when we take all the walls away? What happens when we expand in all directions like the universe? What we could come up with. So don't sell ourselves short that we have to repurpose anything. I don't think we're even close to what humanity could be if we are allowed to be it. Meaning allowing myself to be it while allowing everybody else to do it as well.
Word.
Word.
I dig it, man. I really do. I think that there's a lot of challenges with technology and the way that younger people are coming out of it. I know that there's a big discussion online right now about the Gen Z stare and what it actually means, which makes me laugh quite a bit because it's people trying to explain other people, and I've always just kind of found that really funny. But when it comes to like the overall arcing picture, building building communities can feel difficult and like an uphill struggle for some. Come naturally to others. We didn't even touch on like the idea of like introvert versus extrovert, which I still feel like are old terms, but do kind of apply the idea of how comfortable one is engaging with community and whatnot. But there is all sorts of barriers based on our perceptual lenses and the things that we have gone through, our traumas and whatnot, that really set us up to maybe a slightly bigger challenge. However, we have so much potential in bringing about the paradigm shift that allows citizens to really participate in manners that they're comfortable, they're passionate, and it really moves the needle in some very significant ways. Ripple effects are being made when it comes to like building community. We brought very very briefly on the need for third spaces, which I know is what part of what Victoria is working on. Experiences is another thing, which is something that I'm working on, is crafting experiences so that way people can just put themselves in a place where they have a good time and have a shared memory with people that in their boots on the ground style community. And that's just 2 or 3 ways of hundreds. Like literally there's I want to say that there's no wrong answer, but then of course somebody's going to come up with the wrong answer, so I don't tread that far into there. But get creative. You might fall flat on your face and it doesn't work, but you might find something that in an element of it that will move you in a new direction. So possibilities are endless. Please stay hopeful, because tomorrow is a new day with such possibility, and ripple effects have been made so far already that we're getting there. We are truly getting there. 4 last words. We're going to go counterclockwise today because Matt just spoke. So Victoria, if you for words to share, thank you so much for coming up today and sharing this space with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to be here. But I think, yeah, you mentioned third spaces. I think that's huge, and that's a big part of my mission, is to build those third spaces, creative spaces, collaborative spaces, intentional communities, to really foster a space for people to like grow and build together. But I on this journey of me deciding how I want to go about building this vision, I've decided that I'm not going to allow it to be a I will be happy when sort of thing. Like, it's about the journey and not just the destination. And so that's why I think what Tony said and what Matthew said are both really relevant, because yes, the sky is the limit. I don't think that we should limit ourselves into what we can imagine that we can build. But also at the same time, in the process, we should be connecting on the ground in ways that already exist, that are already available. We should be doing everything that we can to go out into our communities and connect with the people who are already there trying to do it.
Absolutely. Well said. Very well said. Thank you for, again, coming up and speaking with us. Jessie, again, I enjoy your perspective on these conversations. Curiosity is always a lovely thing to bring up. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much for having us and for taking the time and effort to put these together, because these always give at least me a lot of motivation to continue doing this work out in the community. So thank you for having us here. And I guess what I would like to say is, I feel like a bummer we have to start addressing the trauma. Because if we are running from our own pain, how can we expect somebody else to care? Like, if they're running from their own pain, they're not going to care about anybody else's. And I think we also have to unpack the internalized shame that's keeping everybody stuck, thinking that struggling in the world that we're living in is a personal moral failing, instead of symptoms of systemic oppression, neglect, and ongoing trauma over generations. And we need to start including emotions and vulnerability into the way that we organize, start normalizing that, because if we're continuously repressing our identities, our emotions, it results in the kind of behavior you're seeing right now. And so I think that if we can create spaces that center the vulnerable, center children, then everybody will benefit. It's like, how can we figure out building a ramp or building steps? Everybody can get up the ramp. So, what are some of the ways that we can take to kind of address the reality that we're living in, that we are highly traumatized, and unless we start talking about it, we can't purge that from our body. It's like the Barbie movie when they all were brainwashed and America Ferrera started saying, "Hey, this is what's going on." And they went, "Oh." And it was like people were remembering who they were and gaining their agency and gaining their autonomy. And I think that truth telling is going to be a really good entrance into the old world that's dying, the new world that's struggling to be born. And those people that can drop a truth around something you've been circling around but haven't been able to articulate can recalibrate your entire operating system in real time and drop shame and drop just years of stuff you've been carrying with you.
Absolutely. Very well said, my dear. Thank you for sharing that. It made it all come to the light for sure. Tony, thanks again for being here. As always, enjoy your perspective. Thanks, man.
Hi. Hey, thanks for having me. Thanks for hosting these panels. Pleasure to connect with y'all and new faces. I'm going to start by saying this. Nobody likes to see themselves as the villain. And so if we're talking about creating spaces for political healing, challenging political topics, we have to understand that if we're working alongside people that we don't see eye to eye with ideologically, nobody ever wants to see themselves as the villain. Al Capone in his final moments didn't see himself as a ruthless cop killer. He saw himself as a champion of the people. That's just how we are. For some reason, we can't handle our own guilt sometimes. So we have to remember that. And it's best to see the child in someone else, tap into their wonder, see if you can get them to smile, see if you can get them to release. That's that part. The other part is with mixing the old and the new, like we wouldn't have jazz music if we didn't have romantic era music, if we didn't have like military march mixed with the Creole style music in Louisiana that would eventually become Dixieland. And that style of music permeated the world. It changed everything. And it was a mixture of old and new, far and wide. And that's where creativity comes from. It's so rare that we ever think of something brand new. So even as the curriculum changes over time, it's always built on the shoulders of those who came before. And oftentimes it's just redefining the old or looking at the old, but from a new angle. And when I say engaging with these old systems, I don't mean it like a hand-me-down, like we're wearing somebody's like dirty sock. We just like threw it in with some bleach and we're calling it like new. No, it's like taking what's good and shifting it in a new direction, minus the problems, right? And it's not changing the institution from within the institution either, because sometimes it requires a modular existence outside the system that is adaptable and can plug into the system to really change it. And there's infinite amounts of creative ways that we can change this world, from business, agriculture, clothing, interpersonal communication, education for children, senior care, veteran care. Our society is sick and it needs a lot of help. And if we wait for suits to do it, it may never happen. And if we want to do it, we have to remember that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can look at the old, not join the old, but use their model to come up with something new, if that makes sense. We don't have to drive their thing. We can just build something new using our favorite design elements of that as a framework for us to start from, so that we don't feel overwhelmed in having to start from scratch and make a little bit of jazz.
Word. I'll say that some of the best creations come from synthesis. You know what I mean? Like, taking maybe a few different elements of old and making something new. Synthesis is definitely key in creativity. Matthew, thank you so much for coming up today. I really appreciate your perspective on this matter and everything that you talk about on your channel. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Final thoughts. Yeah. I am here. To me, everything that everybody is saying is not a final thought. It's the start, right? because we're all different than we were when we started this conversation. Because there's parts of us that got sparked into other ways of thinking and being and perspective. And this right here is the bridge, is what I got from listening to folks, modeling for others to do a similar thing. Why can't this conversation just happen amongst some folks? Those of you who are watching, invite a couple of people from work, a couple of people from here, a couple of people from there, and just have the similar, some of the ideas and thoughts and questions that you just heard. Bring those to that group of people. Just have a conversation. It doesn't have to be everything has to change instantaneously. Small bite-sized chews. I want to get the flavor out of all of it. I want to chew on it a little while. I don't want to change all of it at the same time because it has to be perfect right out of the gate. No. I want to be able to experience and build this new table with all of you. And it's going to be a different table. If we have the same conversation a week from now, or the same questions, the same outline, be a completely different conversation. Fail. First attempt in learning. Allow ourselves to have that growth mindset. Allow ourselves to expand into the multidimensional emotional beings that we as human beings are. I'm an earthling because I'm of this earth. I'm in kinship with the earth. I'm not above it. I'm with it. And I'm with all of you now. And it's beautiful. And I'm so grateful. Thank you all. Peace of mind, peace of body, peace of spirit.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for being here. I had a blast. And on that note, I'm going to say goodbye. Bye, everybody. Another piece of this conversation has been had. And I don't know about you, but I'm hella inspired to go out and do some community things. Find people in my area and talk about some stuff. I love the fact that Matthew actually gave y'all homework at the very end. That's inspiring, and I'm probably going to do it from now on. Because I love that. We should, y'all should go and spread this conversation about, I should have been doing stuff like that from the start. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you to everybody who is on this journey. May we continue and see the ripple effects cause some form of success. Because I know the little bit of wins put wind into our sails so we can make greater strides and that sort of thing. So I know that, that wins can be few and far between, but we got to celebrate them when they do happen. That's important. Thank you guys so much for being with me in this conversation. I appreciate you all so very much. And until next time, be well, fellow citizens.